You're listening to Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions on product and business strategy. And now, here's your host, Bob Caporelli.
Welcome to another episode of Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions about product and business strategy. Real questions from real people in real companies just like yours. So those of you who are regular listeners to the show or readers of the blog, you know that we've been on a little hiatus for the last couple of months. I think the last episode was released somewhere in the middle of May. And in the blog, at least, we announced that we would be taking a little break and come back with some big and exciting news. And that's exactly what we're coming back to you with during this episode. So, drum roll, the big news is that I have started my own business. And this podcast is now going to be the official podcast of that new business. So the business is called Strategy Generation Company, and true to its name, it's focused completely on strategy training and coaching. And I want to take this episode to describe to you just a little bit about that business, what it is, what we do. I'm not going to answer a question this show. I really want this to be more of an announcement of, what that company looks like and what the podcast is going to look like going forward. And then next week, we'll get back to our standard format of answering questions, just like we always have. So what is Strategy Generation Company? Well, those of you who know my background know that for about the past 6 years, I've been the president of a company called Sequent Learning Networks. And Sequent Learning Networks is a company that focuses mostly in the product management training space. And so my background being all about strategy, there was a really nice fit there for me to bring some of my expertise and so forth into Sequent, both to help them put together a strategy for the business and help grow that business, but also to apply some of those strategy learnings into that business and help product managers with the subject of strategy. Actually got a chance to write a book and got published on McGraw-Hill back in 2015. That book was called Creative Strategy Generation. So I was always able to actually stay very active in my main love and my main field, which is, of course, in strategy development. And because of that, Sequent was very kind to have sponsored the first 50 episodes of this show. So very, very grateful for them for all that they've done. But it was really time for me to go out on my own. And I really wanted to start a company that was focused completely on this area of strategy training and strategy development. It was just something that I really saw was a gap. And the more large companies that I worked with, the more that I saw that this kind of foundational training of strategy was missing from many companies. And that's really what I wanted to focus on with Strategy Generation Company. So what does that mean exactly? Well, certainly, there is no shortage of strategy consultants in the world. I mean, there's a lot of people that focus on that. And I think most strategy consultants that help businesses, they're helping them with a specific project, which I think is great. And because of that, if a company is in a certain industry, most times they'll be looking for a strategy consultant that's a specialist or expert in that industry, so that person can not only help them build the strategy, but also help them do all the background information, research, and even execution sometimes. So in many ways, they become part of that project or part of that team. But what I wanted to do is something a little different. I really felt that there was a gap in the learning and training programs of most companies, especially the larger companies, for this subject of strategy. And I look at, why so many companies have to hire strategy consultants. And I think a lot of the reason is because many of them don't have the basic foundation in strategy that I think that they need to be successful or to optimize at least, the work that they do as companies. And the problem, unfortunately, is that, inside of businesses, when you talk to managers, there's two kind of badges of honor that I think most managers carry around with them. One of them is being able to manage a P&L, right? And if you ask, 100 managers, how many of you actually know how to read and manage a P&L? I think almost 100% of them will tell you that they do. But then when you dig deeper, and I've done this, right? Maybe not as formally as, a survey or anything like that, but informally or anecdotally, when I ask many of the managers who say that they know how to manage and lead a P&L, I ask them about a P&L and I dig deeper on that subject. Many of them really don't know even some of the basics of a P&L. And I think the reason for that is because they're expected to know it. Maybe they haven't had any training in it, or if they had training, it was way back in business school a long time ago when they couldn't apply any of the concepts. And so they feel like it's almost an embarrassment if they admit that they don't know the basics of a P&L. And I think strategy kind of falls into that same category, right? That most managers feel like they need to know how to put together a strategy. They need to know how to be and think and act strategic. And so if you ask them, do you know how to put together a strategy? No one's going to tell you that they don't. But many of them have not had any training in it. Many of them have not had any background in it or experience in it. And if they did, it was, a course somewhere long ago in business school. It was very, very theoretical, and they didn't know how to apply or didn't have a chance to apply at the time. So at the end of the day, it's one of those areas that people don't readily admit they don't know. And interestingly enough, when you look at many larger companies and you look at their training curriculum, their training program, especially for leaders or emerging leaders or new leaders, strategy is just not a part of that in many of these curriculums. So there's a gap there. And I think that gap translates into a lot of these larger companies and even medium-sized companies. They don't have formal strategies or even strategies that can be easily communicated. And so many of these companies are reactive. And once they realize that they're reactive, they have to put together a strategy. So they have to spend a lot of money on a consultant to kind of help them with a big project and putting together a strategy. But I think a lot of it is because they didn't, have those strategies, maybe those smaller strategies throughout their business over time that would have allowed them to not get into the situation where they have no strategy and have to spend a lot of money on creating one. So all of that to say, what I really feel companies need more of is some basic strategy training in their curriculums. And so that's what my new company is really, tasked with, right? That's what our mission is to help companies with strategy training and help them put strategy training programs into their businesses so that everybody knows how to put together a strategy, and they could do that as a standard part of what their normal day-to-day jobs are. So the two types of services that I'm going to be offering with Strategy Generation Company is, number one, what we call strategy training. So these are the formal strategy training programs. And these programs basically consist of two parts. One is a 2-day foundational workshop that can be offered either on-site or online. The on-site version is available now. The online version is being created. It'll probably be available in about 6 months from now, and it's July of 2018, just in case you're listening in the future. So probably towards the end of the year, towards the end of this year or the beginning of 2019 is when the online versions will be available. But those are the foundational workshops that kind of teach the strategy creation or strategy generation process, right? So people know what that is. They know how to apply it into the real world, and they have that foundational knowledge. But then the expectation is that they're going to go out and apply that to some strategy in their business. And that's where part two comes in, which is optional remote coaching sessions, which will allow people to take advantage of facilitated coaching for whatever strategy they're going to put together as a result of the program. So if they took the full program, probably be about, 4 to 8 weeks where they have that foundational workshop and then optional coaching sessions, so that they can get help in putting together their final plan. And what you come out of these programs with is a real actionable plan. Now, I will tell you that these are not meant to necessarily be done at the big corporate level, right? So we're not trying to through this program, we're not trying to help the CEO of a $50 billion company. These are really targeted towards product leaders, marketing leaders, business leaders at a business unit or functional level. So people that are managing in the kind of middle part of a company and need to put together strategies for either the products or portfolios they manage, the markets that they're responsible for, or the business units or functions that they manage. And so that's where these training programs are really targeted towards. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish there, is teach those types of managers how to put together these strategies and then allow them to apply it to a product, marketing, or business strategy with coaching so that they learn how to do it and they can come out with a final strategy at the end. And the idea, of course, is that if enough of the middle managers are working on strategy as a regular part of their day-to-day role, then all of that comes together to form the bigger corporate strategy. And then that corporate strategy is well known, it's well communicated, and you don't have to spend millions and millions of dollars on creating a corporate strategy from scratch because nothing else exists, because it's already a part of your DNA as a company. And that's what we believe good strategy training programs will do, or a good foundational program in strategy training will do. So we also have some other programs outside of those main training programs in the category of what we call strategy inspiration. So these are kind of 1 or 2 day standalone workshops meant to just kickstart the process. So we have one called the Strategy Creation Workshop, which is really meant for new or emerging leaders, perfect as a complement to a, leadership development program, or, teaching some of the foundations of strategy, but without that remote coaching expectation or the expectation that they're going to apply it to a strategy right away, just providing some of the basic foundations of strategy learning, but doing it within the context of a business rather than within the context of a textbook. Which brings me to one last point that I want to make that's actually been under my skin for some period of time. And that is, I want to make strategy and the subject of strategy way more accessible than I think it is today. And I think part of the reason that it's not as accessible as it could be is because there's a whole community of people that almost turn their noses down at would-be strategists if they don't have the right degrees, or they don't have the right background, or they haven't read the right books. And I don't mean to accuse everyone in the strategy community of this, because it would certainly be unfair. But, being part of certain groups and certain associations and so forth, there does seem to be somewhat of an elitist attitude that sometimes is associated with the subject of strategy. And I really, really want to tear that down, right? I just don't believe in it at all. Going to school for strategy is great. Reading all the books is great. I'm not taking that away from anybody, but stop short of making someone else feel small if they don't have that background, because I got news for you. You could put together fantastic strategies. You could be one of the best strategists in the world. And not have even a high school diploma, right? Because there are a lot of people that just have a great gut instinct about what customers want, what companies need to do, and they hit on something that resonates. And those are just as good of strategies as those people who followed some framework in a textbook. So both have their merit, but definitely I don't want anybody to feel like if they don't have the right degrees or they don't have the right background, that they can't be a strategist. You can be. Anybody can be a strategist. So part of the mission of Strategy Generation Company is really making this subject more accessible and making everybody feel a part of it so that anybody could do it. And that's really what we want to instill and what we want to achieve. So we hope that you'll join us in the journey. Go out to the website, check it out. It's at strategygeneration.com. Take a look at what we have to offer. Leave us some feedback. Obviously, this is just launched. So go out and click on the contact form. Leave us some feedback. Tell us what you think. We'd love to hear from you. And of course, those of you who are regular listeners of the show or readers of the blog, that's going to continue. And we're going to go back to our weekly schedule. We're going to move to Mondays now from here on in. So we'll be releasing every Monday morning, but we'll again have the standard format where we answer questions. So go ahead, go to dearstrategy.net, keep asking those questions. We have a whole pile to answer, and we hope to get a whole pile more in. And through the new company and through the workshops that we do, we'll be asking more questions and getting more feedback and getting more people to contribute to the show. So it's an exciting journey. A lot of stuff that's happening here, and we're really, really happy to have you as a part of it. So that's the big announcement. Thank you for joining again, and we will see you back here for another episode of the brand new Dear Strategy. Thanks again for joining.
Thank you for listening to Dear Strategy with Bob Caparelli. To learn more or to submit a question to be featured on our show, please visit us at dearstrategy.net.